Today, we're talking about the story of a young prison warder, her life full of promise just cut short. It's about a search for justice that ended up challenging the very system she was a part of. And it all boils down to one really difficult question. What happens when the people meant to protect you are the ones you need protection from? And that right there, that's the heart of what we're digging into. This idea of the blue wall. You know, that unspoken code of silence and loyalty. But for a grieving father just trying to find out what happened to his daughter, that wall, well, it wasn't a shield. It was a barrier, blocking the truth.
So, let's rewind. Let's go back to the beginning. We're in Nakuru, Kenya. It's a Tuesday night, and a young officer's entire future is about to simply vanish. So, this is Caroline Chesire. She's only 24 years old, a new recruit at the Nakuru Women's Prison. By all accounts, she was great at her job. Disciplined, hardworking. To her family, she was this bright light, you know? A daughter proudly making her own way in the world. But in April of 2019, her life suddenly wasn't measured in years anymore. It was measured in hours. Okay, so the timeline here is absolutely critical. On the night of April 2nd, Caroline's out with a couple of colleagues, two men wearing the same uniform she did. People she trusted. That's the last time anyone sees her alive leaving with them. The next morning, she's a no-show for her shift. Her phone's off. And this was so completely out of character for her that her dad, Michael, he doesn't wait. She drives all the way from Kericho to Nakuru and files a missing persons report that same day.
And that one question is just hanging in the air. Where is she? A little ripple of concern very quickly becomes this huge wave of dread. The investigation, naturally, focuses right in on the last two people to see her alive. Her colleagues, Joseph Caillou and Raymond Kibolo. They're brought in for questioning, and for her family, the agonizing wait for answers officially begins.
And you have to imagine, for her family, that wait was just pure agony. An 8-day search that would end in the absolute worst way imaginable. In a quiet, forgotten corner of the county where a terrible secret was buried. 8 days. Just think about that. It must have felt like an eternity. That not knowing, it's its own special kind of hell, isn't it? The Chesire family was just stuck, trapped between hoping for the best and fearing the absolute worst, just waiting for a phone call that they knew would change everything.
And then, on April 10th, that call finally comes. A child playing near a thicket in Githro village spots something that just doesn't belong. Now, the location here says a lot. It's a remote, rugged area, not somewhere you just happen to be. It screams of a deliberate, calculated attempt to hide something awful. Her father, Michael, was called to the scene to identify the body. I mean, can you even imagine? His words, they just capture a pain that no police report ever could. This wasn't just a case file anymore. This was his daughter taken violently and his family just shattered.
And with that confirmation, everything shifts. The investigation takes that grim, inevitable turn. They weren't looking for a missing person anymore. Now, they were hunting for a killer. And that intense focus on the two men she was with last, it got a whole lot brighter. Now, the suspects' stories were full of holes, just not adding up. So investigators turned to science. Because in the silence of the mortuary, Caroline's body was about to tell the story of her final terrifying moments. And a huge key to that story lay in a detail like this: petechial hemorrhages. It's a clinical term, yeah, but it points to a really brutal physical truth. These are tiny little spots of bleeding, evidence of immense pressure on the neck. It is the unmistakable signature of strangulation. The full autopsy report was, well, it was a damning indictment. Cause of death: manual strangulation with enough force to actually fracture the hyoid bone in her neck. Crucially, there were defensive wounds on her hands and arms, proving she fought for her life. And then, the most devastating finding of all, evidence of sexual assault. As one detective put it, those defensive wounds tell a very specific story. This wasn't some random, distant attack. No, this was intimate. It was personal, face-to-face. This was a close-quarters murder, the kind of thing that likely happens in a confined space, like the back of a car. So now, armed with this undeniable scientific evidence, investigators went right back to those two colleagues. And that unspoken code of loyalty, that blue wall of silence, it was about to come crumbling down. This created an impossible situation for the suspects. See, their initial story was so simple.
They just parted ways, no big deal. But the forensic truth told a completely different story, one of a violent, desperate struggle. Those two narratives, they just could not exist in the same reality. Under the immense weight of that autopsy report, the alibis just started to fall apart. It basically became a race. Who was going to align their story with the science first? Who was going to break the silence? The fallout was immediate. Joseph Caillou was hit with a holding charge of abduction. Raymond Kiplow stayed in custody as the investigation ramped up, but the impact was so much wider. One colleague later said it shook the whole service to its core. The trust was just gone. Suddenly, the danger wasn't just outside the walls. It could be standing right next to you. But this is where the story takes another really frustrating turn. Because despite all the evidence, despite having the main suspects, the path to justice has been anything but clear. And it's left behind a series of painful, unanswered questions. We have the what. The forensics paint a horribly clear picture of how Caroline died. But what we don't have is the why. What exactly happened in that car that night? Was it a rejected advance? An argument that just exploded into violence? That final trigger, it remains a total mystery. And here's the thing that's so hard to believe. To this day, the full story of what happened that night has never been heard in a courtroom. The case has not been publicly, conclusively tried for murder, which means Caroline's family has never had the closure of a final verdict. So what's left are just gaps. Gaps in the official story, gaps in procedures, and this huge, profound gap left by a system that seemed to protect its own secrets more than it protected one of its own people. You know the old saying, justice delayed is justice denied? But maybe in cases like this, it's something even worse. When accountability never really arrives, it's as if justice isn't just denied, it's simply forgotten. And so, we end with the questions Caroline's father still asks himself every single day. And they don't just echo for his daughter, they echo for every case where the truth gets lost in the shadows. For Caroline and for her family, the search for those answers continues.